We thank now Farhang and Hans-Jakob for their time. And Farhang, they're speaking to us from Caversham in the UK. Hans-Jakob was speaking to us from Berlin. Now we're going to cross over to Reza Khanzadeh, who is joining us from Washington, D.C. He's a research fellow at the Sharif University think tank. He's also a PhD candidate at the University of Oxford. We're also joined now from the Iranian capital, Tehran, by Habib Abdolhossein, who is a commentator and journalist. Habib and Reza, thank you very much for joining us here in Scope. Reza, you know, the issue of Iran-U.S. relations and Rouhani essentially coming out with this fairly optimistic tone of the possibility of snapping back into a world before Donald Trump and before the U.S. walked away from the JCPOA. Is he being naive, do you think?
No, I don't. But at the same time, we need to look at all the key phrases or, bullet points, if you will, that we've heard from Rouhani, because he's also made comments, and not just him, but many within the Islamic Republic have made comments about compensation. One being perhaps the $5 billion that they requested from the IMF to battle COVID. But this talking point of compensation is what makes me believe that Rouhani and his administration are not naive. They have been showing signs of, willingness to work with the Biden administration, with Biden, and to see them kind of push back a little bit now, asking for counsel. Now, you do have Zarif, who doesn't toe the same line as the president of Iran. He says that within, I think he was quoted saying that with 3 executive orders, Biden can re-enter the, JCPOA, and so will Iran. So there is this kind of, balancing act within Iran where you have some like Rouhani pushing for more, trying to get more out of Biden in return, where they wouldn't have to give up too much. But then you have Zarif, who says, no, we can, kind of do a, deal for deal. So we can both re-enter and both be in compliance.
What are your thoughts on this? Because, again, from my reading, and I'm on the outside, so you can correct me if I'm wrong, it seems that what Ayatollah Khamenei has said, the supreme leader of Iran, versus what President Rouhani has said about the JCPOA seem like two different things. Am I correct in saying that?
Well, you can say that again. Actually, President Rouhani is trying to keep the door of diplomacy open. And I think that he is realistic enough to understand that, well, it's going to be a very tough way for the U.S. and Biden to actually rejoin the JCPOA after Trump unilaterally withdrew from it. The wall of mistrust is already tall between the two countries. There have been 4 decades of animosity and hostility between the two sides. So you cannot expect Biden or any other administration to resolve the issue within a couple of months. President Rouhani is already in lame luck, and he is actually leaving office in less than a year. So I think that this is not going to happen overnight, and this will take a lot of time. Rebuilding the trust needs a lot of time. And remember, all of this happens after, the assassination of Iran's top general, Soleimani. Trump assassinated Iran's most popular general, IRGC head, World Force head, General Qasem Soleimani, and he still has his blood on his hands. So you cannot expect Iranians to actually, settle the issue over a very short period of time. So I think that this is not very actually realistic, and President Rouhani knows that. He is just trying to, leave the door open for any possible talks for his much touted JCPOA. And as the leader said, yes, there are 2 ways for Iran to actually continue the path. That is, one is lifting the sanctions, and the other one is just trying to get stronger so that, they cannot impose any more sanctions against you.
Reza, I wonder, the political realities on the ground in both countries, right, both the U.S. and Iran, will be quite interesting to watch right after Biden comes into office, right? Because right after he comes into office, it won't be very, very far off. The Iranian elections will not be very far off at that point in time. And certainly, I think that there's a greater issue within domestic Iranian politics of then the reformists versus the conservatives or the principalists, as they're known. Do you think it's a far gone conclusion now at this point that we'll have a more conservative government in Iran, and then that just makes any possibility of things snapping back to what they may have been before Trump that much harder?
I do believe that it is a foregone conclusion that we will have a principalist or a conservative as the next president of Iran, but we need to keep in mind that that doesn't really matter in the grand scheme when it comes to foreign policy dealings, because they're doing their bidding at the behest of Khamenei. And what Abdolhossein mentioned, I do agree to a certain extent that it is not going to be easy, regardless. So we have 6 months left of a Rouhani presidency, and then after that, it just remains to be seen. But if we even look at these next 6 months, domestically, it is going to be difficult to kind of resell this deal to the Iranian people, but then also to the elites within Iran, within the Islamic Republic. And what you mentioned earlier about you have Khamenei on one side speaking in certain tones, and then you have Rouhani speaking in different tones. That's nothing new when it comes to Iran's foreign policy dealings, because they do have to, work both bases, the left base and the right base in Iran. But getting to a deal, I think, is possible. Now, if that deal survives after Rouhani leaves office, that's a whole other question, and that's where my concern comes in. I don't see that deal really living a long life in Iran after Rouhani leaves. Now, there are ways around that, but even those seem to be far-fetched, because that would mean a lot of concessions on both sides, to where this is going to be a deal that goes beyond the JCPOA, and you're bringing in other types of issues that are of concern to Washington and to Tehran.
Habib, I'll give you the word before I let both of you go. On this issue then of the domestic situation in Iran, right? The goal has always been maximum pressure. That's something that Pompeo and Donald Trump have used that term over and over again. Will maximum pressure, because right now, as we well know, the economic pressure on Iranians, and I'm talking about layman Iranians, is very, very hard right now. It's very severe. So will that then force Iranians to accept more concessions?
Well, I don't think so. Actually, if it were Donald Trump, well, you can say that maybe Iran had to find a way to negotiate. But Donald Trump is history now, and under Biden, Iranians are more demanding. They are demanding compensation for actually the damages sanctions incur. They're demanding compensation for actually, withdrawing from the JCPOA. So I think regarding Ayatollah Khamenei's comments, before President Rouhani on Wednesday just talked about coming back to JCPOA. Well, Ayatollah Khamenei has already said that he is a revolutionary leader. He is not a diplomat. And I think that he is just trying to say that, he has not rejected any talks. He said that we tried lifting sanctions once through talks, and it didn't work. But I think he's trying to, the Iranian establishment is trying to stake out a stronger position in possible talks. You see, using this as a leverage, a pressure leverage. And that's a matter of who's going to take the first step. This is very important. For Iranians, they expect Biden to take the first step, because that was the Americans who withdrew from the deal, not Iranians. So they need to make up for that and show goodwill gesture and take the first step. And that first step is very important. It depends to what extent and how much. And I think it would be a sort of step-by-step solution.
Very well. Reza, we really appreciate you both taking your time out of your busy schedules to share your expertise with us. That was Reza speaking to us from Washington and Habib speaking to us from the Iranian capital, Tehran. All four of our guests in this segment have spoken about Iran-U.S. relations, where they will head after Biden comes into office, because, obviously Donald Trump at this point is a lame duck. He may very well try to muddy the waters. I mean, there have been even rumors of Israel preparing for a possible war that the U.S. may wage on Iran, but those are all rumors at this point in time. That may or may not happen. We don't know what the coming days, weeks are to hold till Biden becomes the president of the United States on January 20th, I believe it is. Nevertheless, can we just snap back to a time before Trump? Can we just ignore what's happened during Trump's tenure? The assassination of Qasem Soleimani, Donald Trump walking away from the JCPOA altogether, the maximum pressure campaign, the horrible economic situation within Iran, as well as the grievances on the other side vis-a-vis Iranian activities in the region. Also, is it as simple as just snapping our fingers and wishing all of that away? I highly doubt that. I'll be back with my final segment after this break.